Live.
What up, what up, what up? Peace, love, and blessings, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the STEM Files, the voice of STEM talent in Black culture. On tonight's episode, we chat with Dr. Yasmine Daniels, learning more about her work in analytical environmental chemistry and so much more. Tune in for more of this dynamic episode after this. And we're back again. Welcome, family, peace and love. This is the STEM Files, where we highlight the best and brightest in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I am your humble co-host, Jabril Muhammad, aka Jabrilliant Engineer. I am a civilian mechanical engineer focusing on naval ship fluid systems with a background in material science and engineering, which is the study of the different crystalline structures of materials and how they positively affect their various properties. I am always joined by my illustrious co-host, Tariq Muhammad. What's going on, bro?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Peace and blessings. My name is Tariq Muhammad, aka Tariq Cardiac. I'm a biomedical research scientist with a concentration in cardiovascular pathobiology, which is the study of how diseases form in the heart and blood vessels. I'm happy to be here. I'm in good spirits. Can't wait for tonight's show.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And as I always say, y'all see our faces and hear our voices weekly, at least twice a week. It's not about us. It's about who we bring on, the value that they add. So without further ado, we're going to shut up a little bit. We're going to turn it over to the wonderful, intelligent, and dynamic Dr. Yasmine Daniels. Thank you so much, Queen, for joining us. How are you today?
Thank you for having
Yes.
me. I am doing just fine. I'm really excited to be here, and I can't wait to get started with the conversation.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us. Like I said earlier on, I'm just like really happy right now. I'm sorry if you see me cheesing a lot throughout the show. It just that there's been a lot of things going on, and it's been a lot of overcoming, a lot of just overcoming a lot of things. So I'm very happy and blessed. Um, so one of the first questions I want to ask you, just in regards to your chemistry background, what is environmental remediation, and what exactly does that entail? Like, what do you do with that particular area of science?
So, environmental remediation is basically the study of how you make the environment better, essentially. So, I'm a chemist. I studied chemistry in college and I got a PhD in chemistry. And when I did that, my thesis or my dissertation focused on environmental chemistry. So, and that's kind of like a very broad topic. So, environmental chemistry basically looks at how pollution can impact the environment. So, you look at that from that angle. A lot of people like to think of it as green chemistry, but it's a little bit different than green chemistry because green chemistry focuses a little bit more on ways that you can limit the use of our, natural resources. You can make a process more efficient by utilizing materials that wouldn't necessarily deplete resources. So that's more like green chemistry. Environmental chemistry looks more at the pollution and the impacts on the environment. So as I mentioned before, that's a very broad topic. Environmental chemistry, when you kind of hone in on environmental remediation, I basically looked at how you can use chemistry to produce things that could make the environment better. So you're remediating things, you're basically remedying things, and that's where that word comes from. So that's kind of what it is in a nutshell.
Got it. Got it. Can you describe a situation where your skill set in chemistry has made the environment better, or just kind of tell us a story, or
Yeah,
just something that relates to making the environment better in a sense?
of course. So I can actually tell you a little bit about the project that I worked on because it really has, a direct relationship to this environmental remediation notion that we're talking about. So um, basically, I worked in a lab making these inorganic salts. And they were these salts. When you think about salt, you sometimes think about sodium chloride, right? Because that's the salt that we all have in our
Right.
kitchens. That salt
Mhm.
is it's soluble. So if you put it into some water and you stir it up, it dissolves, it disappears, right? It dissipates into its ions. And I don't want to get too much into the nitty gritty chem, but just to give you
Oh, no, get into it.
Just to give you an idea of what happens chemically so you can envision it. So the salts that I worked with in the lab, they're inorganic salts, but they were not soluble in water. So you could actually put them in water and you could then physically retrieve them from the water. So the idea behind that was that you could use it in some sort of eventual filtration process, right? So if you think about a filter, a lot of us have, not to highlight any particular brand, but they're like Brita and, all sorts of different types of filters. They have resins inside. They have salts and, different types of particles inside that can act as filters. So this is sort of like the basic science side of it. And so these inorganic salts, we were using them in the lab, and they look just like, almost like chalk or powder, depending on if they were solid or grounded down. And so we could take these salts and we could functionalize them. So basically you would modify them chemically, right? In the lab, we would run them through these reflux chambers and modify them with ligands, which is a fancy way of saying some kind of small organic compound that was very highly selective for metal ion, for heavy metal ion, which if you're not too familiar with heavy metals, they are one of the major sources of water pollution. So you have like lead, cadmium, iron, things like that, heavy metals, they can be found in water. And so the idea was, if you take the salt that I mentioned earlier, which is not soluble in water, so you take the salt, you modify it with these compounds, and then you place it in the water, these compounds that you've modified the salt with, they're very highly selective, which means if they see lead in the water, they literally snatch onto it. Or if they see, cadmium in the water, they'll grab onto it. And so once you've done that, you take the salt out, you have clean water. And so, I mean, that's sort of like the end goal, right? But as a scientist, as a chemist, you have to do multiple variations of this salt before you actually get to the perfect type of salt and the perfect modification. And you can, as you imagine, there's so much that goes behind that. Changing different parameters, changing different types of modifiers that you want to use, the concentrations of them, how long you want to heat them for, playing around with the temperature gradients. There's so much that goes into that. So you may be on the end of it, seeing this finished product and having clean water to drink, but there's so much that goes on behind the scenes and in labs to be able to get to that end product. And that's kind of what I was working on. But beyond that, the green chemistry side of it is the salt that I was using. It was called a calcium phosphate. This was actually a biocompatible material. So calcium phosphates are the compound that is mostly found in our bones and in our teeth. So it's sort of like this hard, right? If you look at bones and teeth, they're white. So that's calcium phosphate. So the salts that I was using was that. And because they're so similar to, the material in our bones and our teeth, they're considered biocompatible and biodegradable. So when you're using a compound like that in a process like water filtration, and you're removing waste from the environment, but you're using a biodegradable material, which could potentially be reused in the environment, you don't necessarily have to, dump it into a landfill, then you really are remedying the environment in a sense. So it's both environmental chemistry, so you're trying to reduce the pollution, the impact on the environment, and it's also green chemistry, where you're using some sort of reusable material, so you're not depleting the natural resources in our environment.
Right.
That kind of paints a bigger picture of what my work really focused on.
There's so much to unpack with what you just said, in the first 9 minutes of the show. But I have my set of questions, but I know Jabril got some things going on in his mind right now, so I'm gonna let my bro eat real quick.
Okay, sure.
Oh yeah, man. So that was definitely awesome. And I love when a person in the life sciences, biological sciences, chemical sciences comes on, because my background in material science, but more recently mechanical engineering. Like, I'm an engineer, by schooling and trade. So sometimes what I might think about mechanically, or with like work,
You good, bro? You got it.
Hello, can y'all hear me?
Yep, you're back.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I love when that comes on. So what I'm kind of hearing when you were talking about the inorganic salts is that kind of like uh, high level way of saying kind of environmental detox, or kind of like distillation in a sense. The same way, someone might drink distilled water, and that helps to strip their bodies of certain toxins or things, and it kind of flushes their system. It's like a similar way that you may do this on a greater scale when it comes to the environment or our oceans, things like that.
Yeah, so I think I missed the first part of your question, but you wanted to know whether environmental remediation was similar to drinking distilled water?
Yeah, is that a similar concept when you talk about, like, I guess, distillation from an environmental standpoint, or detoxing, if you will, from an environmental standpoint?
Yeah, so when I think of distillation, I think of um, like a process that includes evaporation and then precipitation, or condensation. So when you say distillation, that's kind of where my mind goes. And as it pertains to like water remediation, or preserving natural resources, it kind of takes me to an area of um, water regeneration, where folks can take rainwater and distill it. So that process is what I sort of envision. But as far as the body and drinking water and I guess flushing it, I think whatever materials are being consumed to allow you to flush the body, they probably have things that can be similar to chelating agents. I don't know if you guys are familiar with chelants.
Yeah.
That
Oh,
can
yeah.
rid the body of toxins. So if you, and I'm not recommending that anybody do this. Obviously, I'm not a medical doctor, but I know that there are things that people ingest that can, that are able to sort of latch on to toxins inside of your body and then give you that flushing of your system. So yes, it's a similar concept, and in nature, or in the environmental chemistry side of things that I worked on, it was a very similar process where we took these salts and we put these chelants on them, so these chelating agents, and those were able to basically latch on to these heavy metals and remove them from the water. So I think you're thinking
Awesome.
along the lines.
I'm
Thank
glad you
you.
mentioned
And
that
so,
because okay, bro.
no, I
My
just
bad.
have one more follow-up question. So, like, that being said, in your studies, in terms of schooling, things you've seen on the news, books you've read, how much do you feel like what we may call things like global warming or negative environmental effects are due to, or are centered around, human pollution and just the natural earth cycles? You see a lot of things where people say, oh my God, we're doing X, Y, and Z to the earth, which I agree with, but there are also certain patterns that happen every several thousands of years that you may not have seen, are actually natural, or in the earth's way of kind of balancing itself out. So do you feel that that we have a healthy balance in our understanding of that, or do you feel like it can be skewed one way or the other?
I think that, and that's a great question, but I think that science has shown over and over again that we are, one, depleting our natural resources at
Yeah.
almost exponential rates. So if we continue to utilize and burn off a lot of these natural resources, then we eventually will get to a point where we don't have any more to rely on. But not only that, I
Mm.
think when you think about what the world looks like now compared to what it looked like decades ago or even centuries ago, we were using less fuels, right? So we were using less biofuels, fossil fuels, things like that. And when we use these things now, because we have much more production, manufacturing industries are going, they're growing, expanding. We have a greater need. The population is growing. So when we're using up and all of these things, we have more cars on the road. We have a lot more exhaust, right? Fuels coming out. So all of these things, as they start to begin to accumulate in our environment, in our atmosphere, that also has a great impact on, on our lives. So, one of the things that I sort of am vaguely familiar with is the concept of accumulation of gases in the atmosphere, and mixing of these gases with the condensation and creating smog. So, these things, in addition to the depletion of our ozone layer, all of that stuff really does impact the environment. And that's something that, yes, I think if we were living in older times where we were not using as much of these resources and producing as much of these gases, that the earth more than likely would be able to sort of balance itself and regenerate these things and balance things off. But I think now, if you think about what the current state of our industrial growth is, it's a little bit harder to believe that the earth would naturally just, remedy itself. So I think as scientists and as just people living and occupying earth, that it's our responsibility to do what we can to preserve our natural resources.
Absolutely. That's a great commentary on that. And I agree. I always like to, understand from a holistic perspective that balance. Because I definitely know, and can see that we've exhausted or have at the rate we're going, exhausting a lot of our natural resources. So, emphasis on renewable energy and ways to properly conserve what it is that we have and be in harmony and balance is definitely key. I have several more questions, but I'll definitely turn it back over to Tariq and we'll keep it pushing. Thank you.
Sure.
Excellent. I'm glad you mentioned chelating therapy, because I did a lot of work with that, with my work in atherosclerosis. The bloodstream that flows through the blood vessels is just like the rivers that flow through the earth. So a lot of that science can go hand in hand with anything that's dealing with toxins or impurities in the fluid system. So I'm glad you touched on that, because that's exactly what I was going to ask you after you were done. But for those who would like to ask questions on screen where we are, like to actually come into the studio and ask a question on camera, definitely text the number 770-695-7912, or you can direct message either me or Jabril on Facebook with the email address, and we'll send you the link to join us in the studio to ask a question right here on camera. All right, so text 770-695-7912, or just DM either myself or Jabril. All right, so my question comes from, you mentioned that it's so much work behind developing something or developing a product in the laboratory. We can't just think of an idea, get to work, and it's just done like that. It's months or years of preparation and work that goes into the development of that product. So, I wanted to kind of not veer away from in the science sense, but just veer away in terms of the specialty of science that you're focusing on. I wanted to talk about, just to get your opinion on what's going on with the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine. There's a lot of speculation behind it because it's been done so quick. So can you give your perspective or your opinion on how fast they were able to produce those vaccines?
So I usually don't like to talk about vaccines publicly because I do work in a regulatory government. And so right. I'm very careful about the information that I put out if it's not on behalf of work. But I will say this, though. There's a lot of science that did go into that. And I think as a scientist, we really rely on science to provide us with the solutions for the world's problems. So obviously we are going through a pandemic. So, we are in desperate need of a solution, and scientists have stepped up to provide us the only solution that they were capable of doing. And I think the information and the research that went into it, the resources that were poured into it, they're valid, and I don't think we should take that for granted. So that's really kind of the message I want to put out there. But that's kind of as much as I want to get into the nitty-gritty of the vaccines and all of that stuff. I know there's a lot of controversy out there about it, but speaking as a scientist, I trust science. And if I didn't, then I wouldn't be a scientist, and I wouldn't be able to speak on behalf of the science that I've done. And I know, like you said earlier, a lot of work does go on in the lab behind the scenes, and oftentimes people see a final product and they don't realize the amount of work that went on, the amount of hours that you put in into developing and perfecting whatever the product is, the data that you actually have to go through. In terms of environmental chemistry, when I talked about making that inorganic salt that could potentially be used as a filter, it wasn't just a matter of me walking into the lab one day and, poof, I had a salt or I had a resin. It was me making the first one, trial and error, seeing if I could make it better the next day, and running a set of trials, a series of trials, not just one. I mean, as scientists, we have to repeat experiments multiple times, and we have to compare statistical data to see the validity to confirm the validity of our results. So there's a lot that goes on in science that scientists don't get to talk about a lot in public, unless they're actually talking actively with their teams, right? These people who actually know what goes on. But in the public setting, sometimes you have to give a very shortened version of what it is that you're doing to sort of sell the story. And especially when you're speaking to an audience that doesn't necessarily have the science background to understand all of the information that you would be providing otherwise.
Gotcha. I totally get it. I totally understand. And I wanted to ask more about the salt. So did you ever see or do you see the product that you developed for that particular use being applied to the situation in Flint, Michigan, or has it not touched that area just yet?
So that's a great question. So the work that I did in environmental chemistry happened before the Flint, Michigan tragedies, what I'll call it. So a lot of the work that I did, I believe some of it is still ongoing. So I left the point and obviously graduated, because I was in graduate school when I did a lot of that work. So I graduated at a point where the project still needed to be perfected. And so there were students who came after me who sort of picked up from where I left off. And as far as I know, I don't know if they've gotten sort of because sometimes, in basic science research, especially at the university level, you have an outside company that sometimes, is interested in like developing your product or your, and so they'll pick it up and they'll move forward with it. And there's all kinds of patenting and things that go on before that happens. So I don't believe that the product has gone that far, but there's still a lot of basic science that's underway with regards to what I started. So I don't know if it's close to being a product that could be used or applied to that, Flint, Michigan scenario you said, but I believe that there are lots of products that are similar on the market. I don't know if they quite use, calcium phosphate like I did, but there are lots of other types of, filtering materials that are being used and probably being considered to, to apply to a situation like that.
Awesome. I would love to see how that unfolds in terms of actually helping with that situation. And so, of course, whatever we can do here at OMS to help. Jabril, you have anything?
Oh yes, sir, definitely. Part of the reason why I just want to say why I love our show and I love being in STEM is because, like I say a lot, it teaches you how to think, how to be a critical thinker, how to solve problems, and be an investigative thinker. There are a lot of things out here, whether you want to call it theory, you want to call it practice, fact, or fiction. Being one who's inclined to STEM, it teaches you that, hey, I know I've been taught how to think, I've been taught how to look for solutions, and I go out and do research and come to my own conclusions. And if I'm intelligent, I engage in dialogues. And that's what we try to always do when we're on the show, is definitely engage in dialogue and be able to be of benefit to those watching and listening. So that's why whenever we bring on a guest, I'm just, regardless of the topic, whether it's something I study or don't, I always feel like there's so much value. So you talked about patents, and I want to shift a little bit to ownership. You have a product, one of a couple of products that you're very proud of, and we're definitely excited about. You have a book entitled "Building My Self-Esteem," and I was on your website, and I was looking at it, and I was like, that is really interesting and definitely much needed when it comes to our children, getting them involved and interested in STEM. So could you please talk to us about your book, what it's about, how long has it been out, and like, I guess, what do you like most about it, and anything else you might want to share with us?
Yeah, thank you for letting me talk about the book so openly. So I'm extremely passionate about encouraging youth to pursue STEM. So it could be science, technology, engineering, math, and I like to refer to it as STEAM, which is sort of what it's merged into more recently. The A in STEM stands for art, because all of these concepts and these areas of study They provoke like innovative thinking, right? Conceptual thinking, that sort of thing. And so they can all be sort of bunched together. So growing up, I really did like doing a lot of science and things. I gained interest in doing science when I was about a teenager. I remember, doing my very first science experiment in high school and joining like a science club, doing, some of these Intel science research competitions. So it's like basically a science fair. And so I was able to get sort of like an early introduction to science. And like when I say science, I mean real science, like the outside of like kitchen things that I would do. Not saying that that's not real, but I was able to see what it looked like being in a lab setting, and that was from high school. So I worked in a lab from that point on. But I think it was more so, it almost happened by chance because, my chemistry professor talked about the science fair, and then I started thinking about putting together a project. And then as part of the program, you had to work in an external lab. So I started reaching out, asking people. My mom worked at a hospital. That hospital just so happened to be a teaching hospital. So there was a medical school, a research center, all of that. And so I thought I would start reaching out. So I walked into one of the labs and, introduced myself. And the mentor, she was happy to take me under her wing. I mean, sometimes you see a little girl wanting to do science, and I guess to a mentor, it might be, free labor, but to her it was more than just that, obviously. But I think,
Right.
sometimes I say to young people wanting to get involved, it really just takes you just trying it out, giving it a shot, knocking on somebody's door or call. I mean, you probably can't do that as much now with the pandemic, but picking up the phone and calling and asking if they have any interest or need or availability, because you really just want to get your feet wet in the area, see if you like it. So I did that. And I was able to work in the lab for about a year. And again, I was still in high school. After school, I would go into the lab. I would have projects. I worked with opossums. So they were these beady-eyed rats. That's what they look like, right? These with really long tails.
Right.
It was scary.
Terrible looking.
Talk more about that project later if you want to know more. But my whole point in bringing that story up is, it was at that point I realized that becoming interested in science is not always something that's natural for young people. Sometimes you get interested by chance. Sometimes you have a family member who's in science and they sort of nudge you in that direction. But I feel like it's probably there's a bigger need to have more literature or texts that can appeal to the younger audience, and that was kind of the basis for me creating this book. So I wanted to create a book that not only had diverse characters, characters that looked like me, because I didn't see much of that growing up, but I also wanted it to be a book that was fun, entertaining. So it wasn't a book that a kid would look at and say, oh, it's just another science textbook. I don't want to read that. I wanted it to be colorful. I wanted it to have, vivid images of what it looked like for kids to be doing science. So if you see a kid doing science in a book, then automatically, subconsciously, you start to think that you can be that kid, right? So those were the images that I wanted to have created in the book. And the art team, H Packs, and even my publisher, McBride Stories, they were amazing at bringing my ideas together. And I keep talking about the book, but I haven't shown it on screen yet. But
yes, there it is.
Right.
It's called Building My, and as you can see on the front cover, there are a bunch of friends, and they're all doing some aspect of STEAM. So the girl in the middle, she's holding a magnifying glass and a beaker with some chemicals in there. You have another one with a calculator. She's obviously a mathematician. You have a scientist down here with some goggles and a lab coat. You have the art friend who's wearing headphones, so he's into music and the arts. You have another friend here who's holding on to, you probably can't see it too well, but holding on to a gizmo or a gadget that's kind of like for the engineers, building robots, things like that. And then you have your techie holding on to the camera back there. So there's a character for everyone. And basically,
nice.
This is a series. So this is the first of several. And obviously it's Building My Self-Esteem in Science. So this is the science book. And this one is near and dear to my heart because I'm obviously more affiliated with the science part of STEAM. So a lot of the stories, the story kind of shows a little bit of the struggles that I had growing up as a kid. It's not an autobiography or anything, but it's a fictional story. But it kind of helps kids to it helps the ideas to resonate with kids. It helps them to feel like they can be empowered and overcome these obstacles or these fears or these challenges that they may face themselves going through or navigating the academic process.
Wow.
You heard
Well,
it.
that's
You
dope.
heard it here first. Yeah, you saw it here first. Like from what I understand, you told us before the show went live is that this is the first time anyone's seeing the hard copy of this
That's
book, right?
I forgot to mention that. So this is the hardcover copy. So it's the very first time that I'm announcing it. They are going to be available very soon. And so I actually have a soft cover book. So this is the difference. This is the soft cover. And here we have the
Excellent.
hardcover. So this is exciting.
Awesome.
I couldn't wait to share it, but you guys got the scoop and I was able to announce it on your show first.
Awesome, awesome. We definitely
Awesome.
appreciate
Awesome.
that. All right. For
So
those who are
I
tuning, oh, go ahead, bro.
no. Finish it up. I'll go
My
right
bad.
after. Go ahead, bro.
All right, cool, cool. For those who are watching us live right now, we are the voice of STEM talent and Black culture. We are live every Thursday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Jabrian engineer Tariq Cardiac. Our social media handles are right there at the bottom: Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So definitely check us out to learn more about what we do with the STEM files and who else we've had on the show so far and will have on the show. But go ahead, bro. My bad.
Yes, sir. I really love, as you were talking about the work that you do and have done, the applied nature of what it is that you've done. As an engineer, dealing in applied scientists, what we tend to want to do is positively impact the world in a very tangible way. And when you were talking about your work with the salts, you were talking about your work for the environment. That's the vibe that I got, and that's what I really, really like. And I like when our young people are involved. They tend to be more interested in practical approaches when it comes to science and something that can put a little money in their pocket too. So I was going over your website, and you have a couple quotes, but one quote in particular that's "Find your chemistry, create your destiny." And I just found that very interesting, and I feel like I kind of know where you were going with it. But if you don't mind, could you unpack that quote for us? What it means to you and what you're trying to convey when someone reads it?
Yeah, and I would actually love to know what your interpretation is of it. So I don't mind sharing what my intention was and what I think about when I read that quote. But I would love to hear what both of you actually think about. So find your chemistry, create your
Oh, I
destiny.
could go first. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, go first you
No,
go
I
first.
was thinking no, because I was saying I didn't want you to think I was influenced by what you say. So I was like, maybe I give it first, and then you can kind of respond.
Okay.
So when I think of chemistry in particular, as well as the other STEM fields, I think about the very building blocks or fabric of reality. I think about everything we see. I think about where we come from, where we're going, and if you know your chemistry, what makes you you from a biological perspective, from a lineage perspective, from an epigenetic perspective, from an interest perspective, what you tend to find is what makes you you, what makes you happy, and what motivates you to be the best you and move yourself forward. So, in finding, locating, and understanding, then maximizing that chemistry, you then find and are able to properly operate in your destiny and be your best self. So that's kind of what I think.
I feel like I don't need to add anything else. I feel like you just you just unpacked the entire quote. Um, Tariq, did you want to
That's
add
dope.
something your own spin on it before I chimed in?
Well, it's pretty much the same thing. I like to think of it like this. So, for example, like Jabril and I, we're essentially cut from the same cloth, so to speak. So, our backgrounds and our desires pretty much give us the similar chemistry, so to speak. So I definitely see that quote as, first off, discovering who you are, find out what you're made of, and then eventually using that chemistry to develop a product, or that product being a certain life for yourself, or your goals or your dreams. So that's kind of what I get from that. And that's just a little bit of a surface understanding of it. But I definitely rock with that heavy. I'm gonna see how I can make some content from that, and definitely send it to some people that could definitely use that inspiration.
Yeah, no, and I like both of your interpretations. And I think when people see that quote, they have very similar interpretations. Everyone can have their own unique interpretation. It kind of um, it is defined in the quote itself. You find your own chemistry, you make your own definition. Um,
Right.
the added piece to that, and I think it's kind of like another layer of finding your chemistry. What I like to think about is chemistry. I like to say to people, is in everything that we do. So you can find
Yes.
chemistry in just about everything. You can find chemistry in things that are both inside the body. So my cardiac guy knows that, and you can
Yes.
find
Yes.
chemistry in things that are outside the body, right? Gabriel, you know that too. Um, so when you think about processes that go on inside the body, you have your breathing in, your digestive system. You can have your lungs taking in oxygen. There's a chemical process that goes on that allows you to deliver oxygen to the different parts of your body through your blood. Using some kind of heme, right? Proteins, hemoglobin. There's
Right.
all kinds of chemistry that goes on inside our body. And I mentioned digestion, breaking down the food with acids in your stomach. So if you want to think about it on that level, if you want to focus on it, you can be a doctor. That might be your chemistry, right? But if you want to focus on, or beyond that, if you want to be a psychologist, there's chemistry that goes on in the brain, right? There are neurochemicals going on in the brain that allows your thoughts to manifest themselves. Allows thoughts to be stored. So there's all kinds of chemistry going on in our bodies. And when you think about chemistry outside of the body, you can take that into several different areas. You can think about it obviously on the environmental side that we talked about earlier. You can think about it a little bit more psychologically, right? So you think, like you said earlier, Jabrilian, you think about chemistry, like how things are working together. That's a little bit of chemistry,
Right.
because chemistry is really the study of how things react, right? So you want to think
Right.
about
Right.
how one thing is reacting with another. So you can think about it in that sense, in a broader sense. But once you find your niche, once you find what it is that you're interested in, it can open up the door to so many possibilities. And that really essentially is your destiny. And that's kind of what the quote really embodies. It's finding what it is that interests you, what it is that you want to hone in on, and then allowing that to provide you the tools to be able to create your destiny. And if it's something that you want to invent, or if it's something, a role that you want to jump into, whatever your destiny is, you can create that by using chemistry, using everything
Right.
around you. That's kind of what it means.
Wow. And that was everything. When you It's so crazy because it really clicked when you said chemistry is really the study of how things react. And what do people always say when they feel like they're in a good relationship? We have chemistry. What does
Hmm.
that mean? We know what makes us react, and we know how to make the other react in a positive way. One of
Yep.
the things I always loved when I took, the bit of chemistry that I took is the concept of a catalyst, right? What does a catalyst do? It catalyzes or makes a reaction to occur quicker, right?
Yep.
So when we think about our lives, when we think about us achieving goals, what I want to be married, I want to have children, I want to have this business, I want to get this degree. What will do we add or even take away from our life that will then be a catalyst to move us more quickly toward that end goal? So when you start to really break it down like that, that's when I say, success is really a formula, and your ability and desire and willingness, consistency, and tapping into that formula will either expedite or delay your personal success. So when you start to, that's why it's hard to blame other people for stuff, because you have a lot of control around uh what you what comes into you from a mental perspective, what you eat mentally, physically, what you hear, and what you put out, right? So when people start to talk about, yeah, I carry my own atmosphere and stuff, right? They are able to impress on their very environment that which they want to see as an end goal. So it's very powerful when you start to really apply these base universal principles to your life and watch yourself be successful. Um, One more quick thing, I'll turn it right back over to Tariq. I wanted to highlight this earlier. You talked about a little bit of nature versus nurture when you said it's not always natural for some young people to engage in science. I would slightly challenge that and say I feel like it's not always normal. It is natural because a lot of children are naturally inquisitive. For example, how many times have you either heard or you done yourself told a child or had to slap a hand when they tried to reach out and touch the hot stove?
Mhm.
They don't know what it is. It's shiny. It's bright. Ooh, I want it. What is that? I want to touch it. That's the investigative, inquisitive mind, right? That's what's natural. What's normal is, oh, don't touch that. That's hot. What's normal is, oh, we don't do that in our family. What's normal is, oh, black people don't do that.
Mm.
Who said that? That's what you, your family, your friend, your associate said. But what's natural is you are the very product of science. You
Mhm.
came through the womb of a woman, and that's a very highly scientific process. So what becomes natural is everything you see. Therefore, you can do everything you put your mind to because it's all connected. So that's all I wanted to say on that part. I'm gonna turn it back over to Tariq.
This has been a interesting, very I'm not well interesting in the sense that it does this show doesn't normally flow how we this is not normally flowing how other shows will flow. You know, answer question, answer question, answer. It's a lot of differences in thought when it comes to certain scientific perspectives. So I'm appreciating this a lot. I wanted to take the time to allow the guest to ask us some questions or anything that you may be curious about when it comes to the STEM files, who we are, or anything like that.
Oh, I get to play the host, huh? I like that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
so I just want to say off the bat that I enjoy your show, and I think you both are doing an excellent job bringing in, guests onto the show who can really speak about what their personal experiences are, but also, connect with the audience on some level. Perhaps there's someone in the audience listening, and may have learned something, from listening to your show, and I think that's one of the things that I strive to do is educate. And so you allowed me the platform to do that, and I'm very thankful that to be a guest on the show. But now that I'm the host, I just wanted to ask you guys. So with a show that's growing in success as yours, what do you guys hope to accomplish? Where do you see yourself with a show like this? Do you want to expand? What do you hope to do with the show? I'm really curious to know that.
Jabril, you want to take that?
You could go ahead. I always go first. You could go ahead first. I'll come after you.
Yeah, so basically, 4 years ago when we started the STEM files, it was more than just to interview black scientists and engineers. It was really to gather the collective of scientists and engineers. You don't want to just interview you. We want to work with you as well. We want to eventually do projects with you. We want to eventually build platforms or do joint social media endeavors. We don't want to just be a show that just interviews you. So we see it as being a movement in a sense. We see it as being the place for black scientists and engineers to want to be on, and not just us seeking them. They want to be on the show. So that's another thing we eventually would love to see more of. And of course, just being a voice for something that is not necessarily promoted or talked about in the general public, or in the everyday language, so to speak. We're just not talking about black scientists and engineers on an everyday basis like we should. So I think that's another thing that we would like to see more of when it comes to the STEM files. But Jabril has a whole another outlook on it, so I would love for you to hear his perspective as well.
So, thanks, bro. That was an awesome answer. I would like to preface my responses. If you look at the logo for the STEM files, you see a black fish with several scientific instruments. We here at the STEM files, we use the term black. We don't say POC. We don't say BIPOC. We don't say person of color. We don't say minority.
Right.
We are black people, and we are proud to be black. So everything that we do, that's who you get from us in that authenticity, and that's where we grow, and that's where we thrive in that. The STEM Files is the media arm of our parent company, for which my bro is the founder and chief operating officer and co-owner. I'm the co-owner and director of engineering. It's called Original Man Scientific, and it's our science and technology company that is geared towards delivering the advantages of research and development to your community. The STEM Files, in all of its greatness, will be a platform for us to showcase all innovations we've done internally, all external projects we've completed, and we'll be able to show what we've done and been successful in, and kind of drive traffic to those things. And we'll also be able to further highlight research, products, services of other people, further connecting that web that is Black excellence in STEM. I always like to say, and I chide people in saying, yeah, we are Black in STEM, but when you really understand and get to the root of it, Black is STEM, right? We always talk about how we're an ancient people of the beginning, and we're also here present and to the end. So we want to let people to know and highlight that you as a Black child, you know, you can always do whatever you put your mind to. You can be innovative, you can be creative, novel, you can do something. It doesn't have to be in the sciences per se, but you can take your natural guidelines and you can apply it to whatever it is you want to be in life, regardless of whether or not you see somebody who looks like you do it or not, right? We want to be that empowering voice where, listen, I'm not perfect. Tariq's not perfect. You're amazing, but I would say, I would probably say, or be safe to say, you would say you weren't perfect, right? But we're striving to do things of value. So that's what the STEM Files will be. We want to continue to expand the show and make people understand, man, we saw these bros come up and they never forgot where they came from, and they continue to serve their communities better and better every day.
That's awesome. Well, I think you guys are onto something huge. I can't wait to see, when you blow up, and I'm going to say I was on their show, when they were starting out. So I'm excited to see that. And like I said, I'm happy to be here. I'd love to come back sometime in the future too. There are more books coming out, so there'll be more to talk about. And especially when I get to the engineering book, the other ones that may resonate with you too. So yeah, I had a great time here tonight.
Excellent. We definitely enjoyed our time with you as well. So we're actually coming towards the end of the show. There's an activity we like to do to help us get to know our guests outside of what we're interviewing them about. So it's called the STEM File Speed Round. So we're asking you a bunch of random questions, and you have to answer them to your best of your ability. And I'm actually going to do something different. I'm going to put a timer on it. So we're going to do a timer of about maybe 2 minutes, and then we're going to see how fast you can answer these questions in that time. Okay.
Okay, let's go. Let's go for it.
All right, awesome. So first thing you do when you wake up in the morning?
First thing I do is I grab my glasses. My mom says if I were to get out of bed and try to go to the bathroom without glasses, I walk into the wall. So yeah, the first thing I do is I grab my glasses.
Got you. Okay, iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
For the sake of time, I'm gonna move on. For the sake of time. All right. Oh my God. All right. Jabril, you got one?
Yep. Walking or jogging?
Walking. I was never really a runner or a jogger for that nature. My sport is volleyball, as you probably know from seeing the post on my page. So anything that allows me to be active without making me run, I thoroughly enjoy. I'll do the bike. I'll play volleyball. I'll even box. I'll do, but don't ask me to run. I can run, if I can run, but I prefer not to.
I feel you.
All
right, cool. If you were stuck on a
skill.
Oh, go ahead, bro.
What's your question?
Yeah, best volleyball skill.
Best volleyball skill that I have, spiking. I play front row in volleyball. I'm a middle hitter. So, and I'm tall. I'm about 5'11". So,
oh wow,
I'm pretty tall. So when I'm in
Okay.
the front row in volleyball, I can jump pretty high. And well, I don't know now because I haven't played volleyball in about 8 months because of COVID. But I would like to think that I'm still in pretty good shape. And yeah, that's my position to play in volleyball.
Got you. If you were stuck on an island for a year, what 3 albums would you have and why?
What 3 items would I have?
Albums, music albums.
Oh, music albums.
Mhm.
That's a tough one. Oh man, I probably don't know what albums I would have, but I could tell you what artists, what music I would want. That might be a little
Okay.
bit for me to answer. So I would have island music because I'm an island girl. So I love soca music or reggae, either one or a combination of the two. I would definitely have some R&B, soul music. Neo soul is my favorite. And I would have jazz. So I like, especially when I'm doing work, lesson planning, grading, or just kind of feeling tense. I like to have some jazz music playing in the background, just to calm me down. Because as you know, as scientists, engineers, we sometimes undergo a lot of stress. We have to do a lot of reading, a lot of thinking. So it helps to like take the edge off for me.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Well, that concludes the STEM file speed round within those 2 minutes. Is there anything that you now? I'm not going to address the whole iPhone situation, just purely because I want to keep the show within an hour. But as Jabril knows, I'm an Android guy. I will never ever cross over to the iPhone side. I don't care what anything. I
And
don't
you'll
care what
never
comes
ever
out.
be on
I don't.
Clubhouse.
There you go.
Y'all can have Clubhouse. If it's about Clubhouse, y'all can have it. But nah, I don't care if the iPhone can make people teleport. I ain't getting it. It just ain't
You
happening.
lying? That's a
But
lie. That's a lie. Let me tell you that we can
I ain't gonna
teleport
lie.
with the
I'll probably
iPhone.
get it just because of that.
We did have a question,
Oh
bro.
man.
I did want to address in these last 10 minutes. We had a question. So Mecca asked, are we going to talk about arts? And I did want to make sure we highlighted that. We do have 10 minutes. So very, very briefly, or you can take this last bit of time. You are very much a strong proponent of STEAM, in addition to STEM. What have been some of the activities that you've done through, service work outreach as it pertains to the arts? And then how have you applied your scientific mind to these activities to even have your students kind of gain even more out of it?
That's a good question. So I like to think of myself as an artist, but more not in the formal sense of the word. So when you think about an artist, sometimes you think of someone who's formally trained, that goes to art school, learns the discipline. So you have I like to think of art as someone who is very creative. And so that could be anything from painting, doing music, dancing. So I play instruments, not professionally or anything. So I wouldn't even brag about it, but I could pick up a guitar and strum a few strings, or I can, get on the keyboard and play. So aside from that, I think that sometimes we have to use our sense of creativity to allow us to understand things that are more difficult. And I like to sort of mesh these two passions of mine. So instead of just doing straight science or textbook science, sometimes you have to think about it in a more creative way. And in a lot of the outreach that I do, along with other, STEM friends and STEM sisters programs for schools, that's one of the things that we like to highlight is that in doing a science experiment, sometimes it can be colorful. One of the experiments that I've done over and over again is something called, excuse me, something called a density rainbow. So, even though I'm a proponent for STEM or for science specifically, because I'm a chemist, I like to show that even in looking at liquids, the densities of liquids, that there's art in it. You can actually take food coloring and you can color liquids with different densities, different colors, and you can literally have them sit one on top of another. And so that's kind of like looking at it more from a visual perspective. So that highlights the art in it. But I think even bigger than that, if you think about someone who's a musician, for example, and that's just like one of the arts, right? musicians like to think very conceptually, and that for me is sort of like taking the art and making it more into a science. And I think that's a way that we can kind of think about, art and science don't necessarily have to be exclusive, right? They can sort of intertwine, and they can allow us to develop our creativity in a more, in a more harmonious way. So hopefully that kind of explained a little bit of this whole idea of STEAM. It's not to look at, fields sort of separately, but to see how they, one can influence or impact the other. And that's really what the idea of STEAM is.
So I thank you so much. And I have one more question that's very specific. So in addition to that, so as me and Tariq were talking about Original Man Scientific, which is our parent company, one of our major goals and aspirations is we want to eventually be in a position to find, interview, and then employ our different Black STEM professionals. Being that you're a PhD, and if you were in the job market, position market, what are some company values or things that you feel like other PhDs would look for or feel attractive with regard to getting a specific position in a research and development based company?
I think, and this probably isn't just for PhDs, but if it's a PhD that you're looking to hire, I think, one, you put a lot of work into your degree, right? You earn that degree. It's not just handed to you. So I think whenever you graduate and you get to that point where you really want to, jump right into the workforce, you want to get into a position or be affiliated with a company that really respects and values your knowledge and your thought process. So it's not just about getting a degree, it's about being able to apply the knowledge that you've acquired over the years. And that for me is important. So me personally, if I'm looking to, get into a position or, be affiliated with a company, I want to know that they are willing to allow me to express myself in a way that obviously represents the company well, but allows me to be creative and to apply the things that I've learned, right, to whatever the company's right. values and missions are. So I think that's probably one of the things that you PhDs would be looking for if you were wanting to hire them.
I like that. And those are some of the things that we're definitely looking to provide when we are ready to bring on people in that capacity. There's something I wanted to ask you. It was from the audience, but I can't remember where I saw it. But so what I'm going to do is, first and foremost, thank you again for joining us tonight. We would love to have you back on to talk about other things, to actually maybe even see, hopefully sometime in the near future, to see a physical demonstration of something you do in environmental chemistry, and even even center the entire show about that. So we definitely appreciate you. And before we tell the audience who our next guest is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with before you go?
Yeah, so again, thanks for having me. I had a great time. I look forward to coming back. You guys learned a side of me that I have not actually openly shared often with a lot of people. So kudos to you for digging it out of me, the environmental chemistry side. And there's a whole other side of me in industrial hygiene, which I didn't even get to talk about, which is where I work currently. So I definitely have to come back to talk about that.
Okay. Yes.
Absolutely. The science of health and safety hazards in the workplace. So I work as a scientist in that field right now, and it's a really interesting field to talk about. Unfortunately, there's not enough time in this show to talk about it, but I look forward to coming back and talking about it. And it's actually a path and a field that not a lot of scientists are aware of, going through their STEM journeys. In grad school. I didn't really know much about it. And I only discovered it after graduating later on, in my career. So it's, I encourage people to explore, the non-traditional routes of science, look at, a field or an area of study that you wouldn't necessarily think would involve science. And I actually highlight some of these fields in my book. So my book it's a children's book, but it has an appendix that can be really applicable to, allowing, young minds to see where science could actually take you. So it lists a bunch of professions that they can look into. Some are traditional, some are not. If they want to start thinking about where they want to be, if they should or were to pursue a career or a path in science.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. Yes, yes. Thank you again so much. We are the voice of STEM talent and Black culture. You can catch us live every Thursday and Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Just follow us on Facebook, The STEM Files, like the page, share, comment, smash the like button on our YouTube page, share, subscribe to the STEM Files. Whatever, just do whatever you want to do to any of those buttons you see on any of those platforms. So
Right.
thank you
Obliterate
so
the
right.
like button.
Just do whatever, right? We appreciate you. We appreciate you for tuning in. Our next guest is actually Patricia Sanjay Gatlin. She is a social anthropologist who studies institutionalized oppression. So she'll be joining us this coming Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll also be going live on National Network View, which is a Black-owned news media outlet. So we'll be going live on the STEM Files platform and their platform every Saturday. So definitely check us out. Jabril, got any closing remarks?
Yo, this show was dope. Like this it was just dope. Listen, y'all. Listen. I don't know if y'all had anything else to do, but you shouldn't have, because we here giving y'all major value, major heat. Listen, this is the STEM Files. We teach he, she, and them that Black is STEM, y'all. Listen, we go hard every week. We try to give y'all the best and brightest, and we did that today. Listen, make sure y'all tune in for Patricia. She is dope. I had a personal phone call with her. We talked for like way longer than we were supposed to, but she's awesome. And, we will
I
definitely be back
bet.
for the part two with the doctor as well. Tune in, the brilliant engineer Tariq Cardiac, Dr. Daniels. Until next time, family. Love y'all.
Thank you for having me.
Peace.
Yes, thank you.